Now joined here in our Nairobi studio by Kenneth Mwangi. He is a Satellite Data Analyst with the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to ask you what the impact of climate change on the continent is, but of course we've been talking about locust invasions and extreme weather. Essentially, are we already seeing it now, the impact of climate change in Africa?
Well, thank you very much. It's very clear on livelihoods, on people's lives, the impacts of climate change. For example, just to bring last year was a perfect year of climatic extremes. It's 1 year that we had droughts at the beginning of the year in this region, not just in Kenya, but this is Eastern Africa and up to maybe Southern Africa. We've had droughts and we've had floods in the same year. Indeed. And then after that, we are seeing cyclones. Cyclone Idai in Mozambique. Also, we are seeing two cyclones that affected Mozambique in a span of 5 weeks. You know, that's very unusual and very strange. And we can see a strong cyclone that landed in the coast of Somalia, and which is very strange for that time of the year. And the magnitude of the cyclones are becoming stronger also. So evidently, from data, from humanitarian impact, we are seeing climate change affecting lives, and it's very evident now, more than any other time.
If the evidence is just really something we can't ignore anymore, do you think African governments are responding accordingly?
Well, African governments, I think it's still a shocker to them because they've never been incorporating climate change into their national budgets. But suddenly now they have to. We are finding some governments are faster in that, while others not. And there's a limit on resources now that they've not been focusing resources in mitigating climate change, but now they have to. The response from African governments is still very low, considering we are the most affected because we don't have the shocks in terms of financial shocks to absorb the impacts of climate change. So we are not doing very well as African countries, but we need to do really a lot more.
So then what are the tools available to us, or what are these strategies we need to adopt in order to help Africa mitigate against these climate disasters?
Well, the tools that we need to tap into is global tools that are now designed to help countries mitigate the impacts of climate change, like they're financing global climate funds that countries can bring down to national climate funds and incorporate it into their treasury that in the development plans that are happening. We are among the fastest growing economies in the world in Africa now. So we can take advantage of that to focus foreign direct investments or even our own investments as countries into green technology, green energy, nature-based solutions, and technological solutions. So that's the advantages we can take as African countries.
And what does the data tell you about what the future looks like for Africa as far as climate change is concerned? Is it going to get worse from here on?
Oh yes, it can get really worse. Already these cyclones we are talking about, 8 cyclones in 1 year, is the effect of 1 degree change.
Sure.
And the Indian Ocean itself has warmed, Western Indian Ocean close to Africa now, African coast, Eastern African coast all the way to the south. We can see it, according to the data, warmed most than even Eastern Indian Ocean. So already data is showing 1 degree change has brought so much impact in terms of drought and floods, impact on economies. We've had growth revised downwards for many countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia already due to climatic shocks. So it can be worse because if there are no interventions, it can even go to 4 degrees. So 1 degree causes 8 cyclones in a year. So imagine if we went to 4 degrees, the worst case scenario that scientists say if we don't take adequate measures, it can get into.
That's very worrying indeed.
It's very worrying.
Thank you so much, Kenneth Mwangi, joining us here in our Nairobi studio on the potentially very worrying impact that climate change could have here in Africa.